Our big impacts, like any business for the office, are things like space heating, lighting, staff transport. We're actually relocated out of our offices just now whilst we're refurbishing our office. And for space heating, we're putting it in a room regulated heating system so that we can manage our space heating a lot more efficiently. We're putting in low energy lighting for each of the rooms, and it's designed specifically for each of the rooms. And we're putting in insulation on the windows as well, because we're actually based in an old building, so this is an old building retrofit that we're undertaking.
So this was a very tired old building which had been built in the 70s, so it was almost an example of great unsustainability. So in terms of the fabric of the building, we did the fundamentals. So there were 36 single glazed windows and we replaced them with double glazing. In terms of the insulation, we put 80 millimeters of thermal boarding in all the exterior facing walls. We had a problem with the roof in so much that there was no cavity space that we could put insulation into, so we literally had to go from the outside in, and we put in 200 millimeters of thermal board on the roof, creating a warm deck and then resealing that. And as far as the rest of the infrastructure of the building, we put in a wet radiator system, and that was powered by a 56 kilowatt wood pellet boiler. We upgraded all the lighting to the latest T5 lighting to create the latest efficiencies. We deployed LED lighting, low fluorescent wattage lighting, dimmable controls, PIR sensors, anything that we could do to limit the amount of power that we're using for the lights. In terms of carbon reduction, we started measuring our footprint in 2006, and that was before we moved to this building. And in 2006, our footprint was 26 tonnes, or just over 26 tonnes of carbon. And last year, our carbon footprint reduced to just over 1 tonne. That's a reduction of 95%, which is a fantastic story. And that's been down to a combination of reducing our carbon with all the things that we've done with this building, but in particular the solar PV system, which has helped offset some of the carbon that we've emitted. We have two different types of solar panels. We've got solar PV and we've got solar thermal. So for the solar PV, we've got 144 panels, and they generate, it's a 36 kilowatt system. And last year was our first full year since it was commissioned, and it generated 28,000 kilowatt hours of electricity for the building, of which we only use about half, and the remainder of that is exported into the grid. And as far as the solar thermal panels go, we've got two of those, and they generate hot water for us. And if there's not enough hot water, then that's supplemented by the wood pellet boiler.
Here we've got the solar panels that we put on the back of the cattle shed. When we built the shed, we planned it for panels, but the angle isn't perfect, so a little bit off south, but we still get about 38,000 kilowatt hours a year from these. And what that means is that during the summer, all the restaurant and shop, all the electricity there is covered by the solar panels, and it does about a quarter of our electricity use for the whole year. So the reason we went for a timber shed rather than a steel and concrete shed is that there's a huge amount of embedded energy in concrete. It uses an awful lot to heat it to get to the point where you can make concrete out of it, make cement out of it. And also with the timber, what we're doing is we're locking up that carbon. So there's maybe 100 tons of timber in that shed that's just not going anywhere. So it's carbon that's grown, and it's then just staying there, being used as stable carbon for as long as that shed stays up.
What we do in this project is try and keep our contractors and our supply chain as close as possible. That means we bring in these people here. The map of Northern Ireland is where we're using now. The contractors and suppliers, we have 53% of them within a 10-mile radius of this site. Another 47%, again, as you see, spread across Northern Ireland, so we're employing people, keeping them busy across the whole country.
To keep traffic off the A96, we decided to build this haul road, which is more efficient for the vehicles travelling up and down the site. There's no congestion as far as getting from A to B. We've got free access up and down here as much as we like. So that, coupled with the fact that the vehicles we're using on site are all low emission vehicles, that helps with their carbon footprint.
Our biggest environmental aspect is traction, fuel and energy, which takes up about 92% of our carbon footprint. Initiatives are typically that we fit driver advice systems to trains, to tell them essentially which throttle setting to be at a certain time to get the train at its destination at the correct time, rather than arriving early and having to sit and idle. And that supports our original eco-driving initiative, which was done to conserve fuel and cut emissions. We concentrate therefore on the staff stations, which are the bigger emitters, and from that we try to use refurbishment projects to try and incorporate as many environmental enhancements as we can into that. So typically that might mean in an old station with a high roof, we might lower the roof to cut the conditioned space, and that gives us an opportunity with the false ceiling of putting in some insulation. When you're putting in a new ceiling, that gives us the opportunity to look at the lighting, incorporating LED technology into new refurbishment schemes. A non-traction carbon footprint is about 8% of our overall 2,500 tonnes a year. To reduce that, we essentially have a series of investment projects as well as our staff behaviour programmes. The initiatives that we've put in are a renewable portfolio of 10 stations with PV solar, and we have 3 wind turbines. We also encourage our staff to come up with ideas, because obviously being centrally based, you don't see everything, you can't see everything at 347 stations. So we have a staff rewards scheme.
So on our hybrid vehicles, we've seen a substantial reduction in fuel, and that's great because that equates directly to a reduction in their carbon footprint. So when taken together, the savings from both the single and double-deck hybrids equate to over 1,200 tonnes per year coming off our annual carbon footprint, and that's a very substantial saving for a company of this size. We've also carried out other measures around the business to cut our carbon footprint even further. So all waste generated both inside the buses and all the waste generated inside the business goes for recycling wherever possible. So we promote recycling, and also we promote the use of materials which can be recycled. So there's no point in generating a lot of waste that you can't then recycle. We source all of the electricity for our operations from renewable sources as well. So when you take all of these things together, the renewable electricity and the recycling of waste and all of the fuel savings, we're now saving over 3,000 tonnes per year from our annual carbon footprint.